Hi, my name's James. I am a graphic designer. Thanks for coming and hearing me talk today. I know it's not directly related to what you guys do generally, but I think there's a lot of crossover between graphic design and lots of different creative disciplines. So it's a real pleasure to be able to share some of what we do with you guys today. I'm James, as I've said. I work for a company called Studio at Large. Ironically, we're quite a small studio. And we work in Collingwood. That's our building there, along with probably, we work in Collingwood along with probably all the other graphic designers in Melbourne. So it's a real creative hotspot, you could say. We do lots of different things. We have a wide range of clients across lots of different disciplines, as you can see. What we do probably differently to a lot of other design studios is we do a lot of built environment stuff and physical signage. But also we do a lot of classic sort of brand identity, branding work, digital design, animation. So we are pretty agile, even though we're quite small. And given that, there's always something different coming across our desks. This is us. I am the only one with a photo because I trawled the server and couldn't find where all the headshots were located, so I've just picked a few little icons to represent my other team members, so Sam and Amy, and they're surprisingly accurate representations of who they are, which I'm glad they're not here to hear me say. A little bit about me. I thought I'd introduce myself, through my discipline. So I thought I'd backtrack through my life through logos. So I currently work for Studio at Large, as I've already explained. Before that, I worked for a printer called Implant Media, which you probably wouldn't have gathered from the name is a printer, but they are. And before that, I worked for an online directory called the Urban List, where I created content. Lots of top 10 places to brunch and all that kind of thing. That job probably wasn't in my top 10, but I definitely learned a lot about the industry and how to make work really quickly. And before that, I was studying at RMIT, where I studied graphic design. I actually learnt from a person who's going to be speaking, I think in this room up next, Stephen Banham, who's a real, I can't think of the right word, but he's just an amazing designer, and really, I'm sure we'll have a really interesting talk. So RMIT. I also studied at the University of Melbourne, but when I was there, I was studying banking, and I worked for a little bit of time at the NAB, which was another pretty life-defining period for me, and one that I'm glad I don't do anymore. And before that, I went to a posh private school in Kew. I support the Geelong Football Club, the best team, maybe not this year, but just spiritually the best team. And I drive a Peugeot, just to throw another logo in there and fill up the slide. So, and sorry, very importantly, I had a short period of time working as a professional food taster at Craft, which was not as fun as it sounds. You eat a lot of cheese and chocolate, and it's not great, too much. So why did I go through that? I guess I wanted to outline that sometimes logos tell stories better than others. Some do their jobs more efficiently. Do these logos tell my story well? It's hard to say, just by looking at a bunch of them on a page. Do they tell their own story well as well? And it's sometimes questionable. You look at the logo for Peugeot, it's just a lion. It doesn't really say much about that they are a car manufacturer, but they have enough brand equity built up that you know. So sometimes a logo doesn't have to work that hard, but sometimes it really does. So yeah, just as I've just explained, some logos are a lot better at telling a story than others. And it's not always easy to communicate efficiently just using images and type. But that's pretty much the crux of what we do every day. And that's the key problem. We need to work out how to communicate visually and communicate efficiently. My first interaction with games was obviously, for a lot of people, a similar experience playing Nintendo. And this logo has a particularly special place in my heart because I look at it and I think about all the fun times I had growing up with Nintendo. But frankly, it doesn't really tell much of a story. The experience, like looking at this machine, you know, that's what you think about when you see that logo. So the logo itself doesn't really define the brand, it's more the experience. And you know, Nintendo doesn't necessarily need to speak in that way to express, you know, too much through its logo, because people all share that experience. And obviously, growing up, there was also Sega. The Sega logo is, you know, it's a cool-looking logo. It's kind of sci-fi looking. It's futuristic. It had associated marketing that was really edgy. I think the strap line was Sega does what Nintendo don't. And look, you know, obviously it's a matter of opinion, but I think, you know, the Nintendo was a better system. And like the power of the branding and the way the machine looked can kind of go a long way. So I guess that is sort of the power of what we do, along with, you know, good marketing and product design and all these things working together. Sometimes the brand can say more than the actual product does. And to that point, graphic design is powerful when it's efficient, when it communicates a lot in a short space of time and effectively. And I guess this is where it brings me to talk about game designers and game design itself. And I think what's always fascinated me about that is how efficient people who make games are with the way they communicate visually. They've always had to be extremely strategic, efficient, and purposeful when creating images because, you know, initially the hardware kind of limited you know, how you could represent something visually. So it had to say a lot very quickly and with, at times, very limited technology. A couple of years ago, a friend of mine put me in a game, and it's just Mario. But he made this for an event, and he represented, as you can see, the physics are way out, and things don't really behave as they should. I like the way the question mark just rolls back into frame there at the end. But the reason I'm showing you this is what my friend Terry did, and I was really excited by it, was he made a little Mario version of me. And I'm kind of wearing the same thing today. So I didn't actually do that on purpose, but you know, that's just how it's turned out. But you can represent a lot of information very quickly with very limited resources. And this is what game designers have always done. So that's again just illustrating my point. It took a while to nail that jump pose. So game designers have always been, to my point, have always been very efficient communicators. And designing a character in such a reductive way is a really similar exercise to what we do when we create a logo. Being able to, communicate quickly and have people, you know, understand what they're looking at, even though you've got a limited resources. So, what I'm going to talk about now is, I guess I've outlined that similarity in what we do, and I want to talk about these, what I've termed, and I've made this up completely, what I've called moments of alignment, where creatives face shared challenges in order to solve a design problem. And to explain that a bit further, I've tried to map out a bit of a diagram, which hopefully makes sense. I've kind of just invented this logic, but I think it stands up. So we're all, if these are like all the design problems that designers across all different disciplines are solving in the world. So for instance, you might have a graphic designer, industrial designer, game designer, whatever, digital web designer. You're all facing specific problems to your field. Generally, the path to the solution or to the final product is not this straightforward, as you probably all know. And if it was, a lot of the design work that would be out in the world would be pretty boring. It'd be all the same. So like the path to the result is generally a bit more like this. I've probably exaggerated a bit there, but it helps illustrate my point. So when we're working on a design problem, the thinking is never in a straight line, and I think a lot of the times we're crossing paths with our thinking. And this is what I've termed as a moment of alignment where we're not necessarily doing the same thing, but the thinking is the same. So it's when a digital designer is thinking the same way as a graphic designer to solve a problem, or any example. The important thing about recognizing these moments is they allow us to solve problems differently and more innovatively. If you think back to that slide with the straight line, if we're just doing things the same way every time, we're going to create samey work, and it's going to be boring. So being able to see what other people are doing, see what how other disciplines are solving problems, it allows us to be more innovative. This is exactly the same thing I just said, but explained with the expanding brain meme. I don't know if I need to leave that up for too long. I think you get it. Oh.
Sorry.
No, it's all good. It's all good.
It's a good way of explaining it.
I should have just gone with the brain meme and nothing else.
No, I love the other diagram. This is great. I can show the other artists at my studio this.
I'm glad that was worth putting in. So my first moment of alignment is the moment where you reach information overload. And basically what I'm talking about here is when you need to represent information visually. I think we're all familiar from playing games that with this kind of screen. And it's kind of the first thing I think about when I think of how information is represented in a game. When you're selecting a character and you have certain attributes that you sort of base your decision on. I have given myself some criteria. I've given myself 1 bar for relevance just because I guess I'm not in the games industry. So, and my games knowledge, I gave myself a little bit more there. But rambling ability, very high, very high. So I think I'm good there. It's strong. Probably doesn't come in that much handy, but it's there. Volume, I thought I'd go halfway just because I wouldn't really know until I'm actually talking whether my speaking volume is good. Can you all hear me? Or maybe I can give myself another bar. And punctuality, I was here very early, so I think I can bump that up to 4 actually now. So in terms of information design and how you solve a problem, we have done a lot of work for T2. T2 obviously make tea and sell it, and we were brought in to help resolve. We were brought in to help resolve their store wayfinding and how to create a hierarchy of information within the store so that physical space can be easily navigated and purposefully navigated by a customer. And what do I mean by that? Well, a good experience in retail or hotel or restaurant or anything, it shouldn't just be a simple and pleasant experience. It needs to be a focused experience because people who enter a store, you eventually want that customer journey to end in a sale. But you don't want them to feel like they're being pressured. So it's that moment when a customer sort of stands back from their experience in the store and kind of thinks, wow, this experience was just for me. I could walk into the store and sort of navigate this in my own way. What does that involve for us in terms of organising information? Well, a really important thing is identifying the levels of signage that are required to guide a customer through a purchasing journey. From the sort of entering the store to that honing down to that point where you're actually reading a price tag and buying a product, this journey needs to be mapped out. So in terms of customer touch points, when you enter a store at T2, there's generally the first thing you walk into is the sampling table. And then, you know, you might sort of try something you like and work your way down to a bigger directional sign, which is indicating a T category. And then the experience obviously becomes more and more focused. And if you just look at that photo there, so you've got the T's obviously lined up, a bit of information, and I guess the ultimate challenge is how do you focus the customer to the point where they're reaching for that box that says "smell me." I don't know if you can read that it says that, but it does. Which in any other context is a very weird thing to get someone to do. But in the context of tea, that's what you want. You want the experience to be easier. You want them to know exactly what they're going to be buying. So yeah, creating an experience that's focused, restrained, and strategic through the information design in the store. Another job that we did for T2 was this induction handbook, which was meant for staff to learn more about the product they're selling and become better store managers and effectively guide a customer through that journey that I've just described. It also allowed them to familiarise themselves with the product and sort of also the voice that T2 speaks with, which is a very deliberate, very well executed voice. They've got a very tight brand. The orange is obviously, you know, iconic in terms of the T2 branding. Here we implemented illustration and playful diagrams to sort of evoke this spirit, but also providing that really essential information in a more digestible way. So yeah, just injecting some unique design elements into what they already do very well. Yeah, and again, just more examples, flavoured profile and tea lingo, which they all need to be well versed in order to, you know, explain their product effectively to customers. So how does the same thing work in game design? Well, organising information in video games borrows quite a lot from, well, you know, they borrow from each other, but the methodology I've just explained is definitely very prevalent in the design of games and how you navigate them. RPGs such as the Legend of Zelda series have always communicated significant detail in a streamlined and really fun way. Reading a map, moving around an inventory screen is always a really pleasurable experience because it's fun, it's colourful, it's simple. This is a link to the past, where, you know, it still had that sort of colourful and exciting sort of imagery, but maybe the hierarchy was a bit off. And, you know, obviously in the latest incarnation of the game, you see that technology has obviously helped these screens become a bit more navigable. But the basic framework is pretty much the same. You know, you've got a grid of icons and you sort of, the execution is pretty much the same, which speaks volumes really for the design of the earlier game, which is, yeah, very impressive. Football Manager is a game I've never played, my brother loves, and it's basically a game that's all menus. And it's just, the level of detail is astonishing. But being able to implement sort of design elements such as colour and hierarchy and typography and all these, you know, elements that go into every design, to sort of create these really engaging icons and data visualizations and, you know, representing a football pitch and being able to show all this stuff quickly and effectively is really impressive. And I know from his experience playing the game is that it all works. This is a personal experience from a game that probably didn't implement such great information design, but I want to talk about it because I just think it's quite funny. Yeah, it's a game that holds a special place in my heart because it was the first football game I ever played, probably that a lot of people played, and it was buggy and awkward, and you could work, my brother worked out a hack where you could pretty much just jump over everyone and kick 40 goals and win like in ridiculous ways. But it really didn't matter because it was a football game and I loved that. And, you know, I also love video games, so the two coming together was very special. But the menu design and the information design was pretty unique and pretty weird. I really like this weird office hovering over the MCG. And the fact that you know, you're on a computer but you've got another computer in the game, and it's the setup center. It's just all really, I just love it. I love I love that they did that. In terms of the actual setup, it was very complicated, very confusing, but yeah, I just thought I'd talk about that because it's great. My second moment of alignment is the moment when you realise you've seen this before. And what do I mean by that? Well, I guess what I'm saying is ideas don't come from nowhere. We often borrow and reimagine what's come before. And quite often we will use an existing aesthetic to tell a new story. And the exciting thing about that is not necessarily the old just being recycled. It's a point where the familiar and the unfamiliar, which is the new design, meet. There's a documentary on YouTube I'm sure you can find called Everything is a Remix, which sort of goes through this, this sort of idea. And it's not copying, because that's not cool. What remixing is surveying the past, conducting thorough research and compiling it, which is something that we do every day, and using that as a launch pad to create something new, which is probably a process familiar to any creative industry. But it's important, and it's important to do it properly, and it really makes for better work. So that's cool. We implemented some maybe not so subtle remixing for a cinema ad we created for a dining precinct, which is at Camberwell Place, which is a shopping centre in Camberwell. We referenced some animated titles that are from sort of the 60s and 70s, this kind of Saul Bass style artwork, and sort of reimagined it with modern typeface and sort of jazzy drums to sort of create a familiar mood for a brand new precinct. I'll just play that now. So I don't know if I explained, but that was an ad that played in cinemas. Did I say that? Yeah, I did. The ad was relatively effective. We don't need to go into that. Okay. Maker and Munger. Maker and Munger is a brand identity job that we worked on. Maker and Munger is a cheesemonger at the Param Market. His name's Anthony, and he's one of the most knowledgeable people in the cheese industry in Australia. And he makes amazing grilled cheese, toasties and things. He's, yeah, very, very good. Sound like an ad for him, but he's excellent. And cheese is good, so. Cheese, the thing about cheese is that it's a product innately linked to where it comes from. And it completely, the environment that the cheese is made completely defines everything about it. So the flavour profile, the culture around the making of it, and packaging, anything, it's all very tied to a place. And we wanted to capture this in our identity, but without sort of just borrowing a visual culture and aesthetic. So Anthony, who is Maker and Munger, loves that vintage alpine imagery and those tourism posters that are very of a time. A very gothic typeface, warm colours, and that type of illustration. And this sort of aesthetic is associated with a lot of cheese-making regions and a lot of the cheeses he sells. So we thought that borrowing from this aesthetic to create something unique was the right way to approach this. So through a bespoke typeface that we drew, that's sort of reminiscent of the titling used in those posters, and an illustration and pattern that hints at the textural variety of cheese, as well as the Swiss Alps. The Maker and Munger brand ID is sort of a nod to that romanticism of cheese making. The physical space where Maker and Munger is refined and modern, with vintage flourishes. So this job extended to the physical environment. So in the signage, we sort of wanted to stay true to that traditional type that we were working with. So the method of creating the signage was the same. Sort of that traditional tray lettering with neon inlay, and a bespoke menu board with a similar Gothic typeface, and just a general acknowledgement of the nostalgia. Is carried through to the entire space. That's obviously a tote bag. You have to have a tote bag, even if they don't eventually make it. You have to show them a tote bag. You have to show your client a tote bag. So there's a tote bag, and it actually got made, which is cool. To sort of continue that theme, we created more of a playful set of illustrations to accompany the brand. So Anthony really liked the work of Raymond Savignac, who's a French illustrator from a long time ago. Well, not that long ago. But the illustrations were kind of perfect for this because they have a real cuteness to them. But they're inherently commercial. They're all used in advertising, and they really fit the bill for Anthony's shop. So we created a bit of brand collateral in the way of postcards and loyalty cards, and those posters were sort of used as a bit of an Instagrammable wall in the space. So people who go to Maker and Munger can kind of show people that they were there. And then we sort of brought these to life on social media. It's weirdly pixelated on screen. Just wanted to let you know that we didn't design them that way. Yeah, so my favourite is definitely the kissing cow. But the skipping cheese man, when you really think about the skipping cheese man, it's weird. It's a weird thing to think about. Someone's skipping with cheese on a sandwich. It's just a weird vibe. So games. How do games reference and reinvent and remix? FIREWATCH is a game which I haven't played, but I think is just beautiful and has a wonderful graphic style, but also a really fantastic understanding of its content and the history, of the sort of the US National Park system, which has its own rich visual history. Not only obviously because it's dealing with natural environment and that beauty, but the graphic style, which is really faithfully represented throughout the game. And just sort of the visual ephemera and bits and pieces and the detail involved in, the decking out of the tower there, I just think is, really wonderful acknowledgement of a visual style that's really linked to the subject matter of the game. And these posters, it also linked through to the marketing of the game, which is really clever. So these posters I think you could buy and reference those vintage, the actual national park posters that were created. And it's, just all created in that style, which I think is really cool. The Fallout series, another game I haven't played, but definitely leans heavily on an art style. So in this case, it's retro futurism, that vision of the future from the 50s. and the atomic age, but kind of obviously dilapidated and post-apocalyptic. So again, another game that was really thorough in the way that this vision was sort of represented across the game. A really unique visual language and really thorough, and to the point where this sort of style was so iconic that in advertising you don't really need to know that it's a game. It's just you recognise you recognise Vault Boy and it's Fallout 4 and it's a game and you want it. Which is really testament to the marketing and the graphic style that's just through every layer of that game. I want to talk quickly about how the design industry is kind of remixing itself and devolving to 8-bit. There's a sort of a whole swathe of games that have reimagined 8-bit artwork and how you can kind of be creative in the way I was talking about before, with creating a little character with so little detail, but so much communicated through it. I think people are rediscovering that this is, that there are still, it hasn't been tapped, that style, and you can still create new and interesting experiences. And the graphic design industry is getting in on it as well. This is obviously 8-Bit Burger, which is a burger joint. And this was designed by Studio IO, and it's a very playful, fun way to represent that 8-bit style. So my third point of alignment, or moment of alignment, is the moment when only words will do. And basically what I'm talking about here is typeface and how that can kind of give your design voice and tone. It's kind of the way your brand speaks, and it's very important. Typefaces are probably our main tools of trade as graphic designers. They give the work a voice, as I've just said, and picking the right one is sometimes pretty difficult. And I've made some sort of pretty obvious, but some not so obvious examples of maybe how the voice can be completely different based on the typeface choice. So for instance, Doom, that game becomes completely different when it's a handwritten script type. Super Mario Brothers, obviously that typeface is Chap, and Chap's a very refined, elegant typeface and definitely not the right tone. Minecraft set in Frankfurter, which is that typeface, is maybe playful, but Minecraft is obviously a game where you're dealing with cubes. So a rounded typeface might be the right tone, but it doesn't reflect what the game entails. Red Dead Redemption, maybe the tone again is right, but a black letter is probably culturally completely wrong. So there's all these things you've got to consider. And my last example is kind of ridiculous, but succumbing to trends is something that a trap we can fall into. So picking a typeface such as Bengway, which was made cool and trendy by Stranger Things, is not necessarily the right tone for everything. So, it's easy to get sort of sucked into what everyone's using and what everyone thinks is right. But you've got to consider, obviously, the job and the design problem that you're trying to solve. Yeah. So again, Pac-Man becomes a bit maniacal when he's sort of behind that metally looking typeface. I've designed a typeface. I designed it for the centenary of Canberra, and I entered it in a competition and it won. And this was a typeface which I wanted to really, I guess, speak for Canberra, but obviously not being from there, or it's a tricky job. So what I did was take inspiration from the plans for the city that were drawn up by Walter Burley Griffin, and shapes and geometry seemed like an appropriate way to speak about Canberra as a voice for the city. I think it reflects a visionary ideal. And precision, the precision and planning that Canberra sort of has is like no other city, and I think that I wanted to sort of capture that. And obviously there's so many iconic shapes and interesting architecture in Canberra that I also referenced to try and give it a uniquely, I'm not going to say Canberran because I don't think that's right, a unique voice that's distinctly Canberra. Thank you. Canberran. It's a Canberran voice. And again, the typeface performing at different sizes. I think this is probably a game that a lot of people have talked about in relation to graphic design, but it's just really wonderful and a great example, not only of type working in a game context, but just a really amazing visual style that's just so well realised. Designers Republic were obviously the designers who worked on that game, and they captured, in kind of the same way that Sega captured that feeling of cool with their branding, these guys, Ian Anderson and Nick Phillips, really captured the spirit of design in the late 90s and early 2000s with their sort of bright and playful work, and it's, you know, affiliated with it's kind of a bit of a futurism, but also, you know, we're really strongly associated with a lot of design for electronic dance music as well. So they sort of had all the bases of cool covered at that time. And they obviously worked on WIPEOUT, which I feel is kind of peak Designers Republic, where they really went all out. In terms of typeface, I wanted to highlight quickly the logo, which is really, like, from a legibility point of view, pretty terrible. And the design, like, it's messy and it's maximal and it's a bit crazy, but it works. It's the right voice for this game. And that can kind of outweigh certain other negatives. If you've got the right voice, it's you know, it's the right call to sort of go that way. And the logo is really clever in that it's kind of reflecting like a digital readout where all the numbers are made up of the number 8, and they're sort of just rotated and skewed in different ways in a way that you kind of have never seen before. So yeah, these are just, you know, I've just included these because they're just really fun little nuggets of goodness. And a level of detail that probably, look, I'm speaking out of turn here, but I think a level of detail that probably wasn't seen in art direction of video games up to this point. Yeah, so that's type. My next moment of alignment is the moment when reality is suspended. And that's kind of a moment we like to strive for in pretty much everything we work on. So A Smile in the Mind, you might have heard there's a book called Smile in the Mind, and it's kind of about witty design thinking and witty visual thinking. And I guess in the context of what I'm going to talk about, it's that sort of idea of a visual trick or something unexpected and surprising that you know, really engages you with what the brand's trying to say. I think the classic example, which I haven't included in the slides, is the FedEx logo with the little arrow that's created in the negative space. Go have a look at it if you haven't. But just that kind of witty thinking that says exactly what you need it to say in a neat little visual trick that kind of takes you aback. It's something that I implemented when I worked on a logo for a band called the Horns of Leroy. They are a New Orleans style brass band, and they play really sort of fun, energetic gigs, and there's a lot of movement, and it's kind of playful most of the time. So what I did for them was, instead of, you know, sort of whacking a trumpet on, you know, and some type and sort of, you know, showing you what their band was about, I created a logo that kind of expressed that in a different way. So the movement of the letters and the way they extend and the little bouncing O's sort of speak to that idea of music playing and an idea of just things happening. This is some work we also did at Camberwell Place, which was initially a logo that referenced patterns and motifs of the largely residential suburbs, so sort of things that are seen in the architecture. But also the logo kind of became a convenient tool to illustrate the offering of the centre. So when we sort of work on shopping centre brand IDs and on that kind of thing, we talk a lot about placemaking. This logo kind of had that built in with their little placemaking icons and kind of representing through that motif that was designed initially to represent patterns, now illustrates the offering of the centre. SMASHVINO is a online business that sells wine in new and interesting ways. And we wanted, with their brand, to suspend reality literally, and to illustrate how they were shaking up the industry. So what we did for some photography that accompanied the brand was to use, obviously, bottles, glasses and objects, and suspend them in midair, or just break them, or place them in precarious positions to illustrate moments of tension. So I guess the idea with SMASHVINO is that they were disrupting the industry, so we wanted to kind of imbue that with, in the photography that was used to sort of launch the website. So that's how we can kind of, literally suspend reality and show things in a state of flux and illustrate visually, the idea of disruption without saying they're disrupting. So that's kind of behind the scenes. That's what, that's the real reality there. Just thought I'd include that because it's a weird scene when you're taking photos of things like this. So just to race through a bit, I think Shadow of the Colossus is a game that I really admire for its the way it sort of gives you that feeling of suspension of reality through the use of scale, and the way that it implements ideas about the sublime. So the sublime is a philosophical idea that kind of talks about the unexpected sense of awe when you see something that's quite beautiful and kind of terrifying at the same time. So you might be, looking at a scene of mountains and think that's amazing, but also quite terrifying that nature can be that beautiful. The way the game kind of does that is the composition of the way you move around the game, heroing the game environment, and actually not a lot of intricate gameplay, apart from when you're actually battling the Colossus, or the Colossi, I guess. So you're kind of moving through an environment, really, embedding yourself in the mood of the game. And it does this through the way you kind of, your character isn't positioned in the center of the screen, but on the side. So you're kind of really taking in a scene. Push Me, Pull You, a game you're probably all familiar with. It's created by Melbourne studio House. Just a really fun and weird idea, and absolutely surprising and unexpected. And again, they followed up with the Untitled Goose game, which I just think is fantastic. And I just love that. That shot just alone is enough. Just a great idea. And just unexpected, silly, and just a moment, obviously where reality is suspended, but and a game that illustrates that being an arsehole can be fun. So my last point of alignment is the moment when it's time for a drink. And basically, this is just really an excuse to show you some branding we've done for some of our alcohol clients, but also just to illustrate that as creatives, our play is just as important as work. So, we obviously all work very hard, but it's important to, have a bit of fun, have a drink, do things you like, and that's where you gather your inspiration from for your work. They fuel each other. So we've done some work for a brewery called Fury & Son. This was a can we designed for their summer ale, which was really fun and looks really great in real life. We've done a lot of work for Hawkers. We don't anymore, and they've rebranded, but we think that, again, this is sort of talking to what I was saying before about information design and how you can categorise certain things. Obviously, these are using colour to show the different products. Pretty simple, but the building blocks of, representing information in product design. Again, for Hawkers, this is the Rover can we designed. It's a very, I think this can had a lot of shelf presence because it's just type. There's not a lot of beers, a lot of things on, a lot of products on shelves are kind of screaming at you all the time. And beer particularly, the beer fridge is pretty colourful, lot going on, but we think that this had quite a lot of shelf presence and spoke with maybe a stronger voice because it was the only thing on the can, the type. These are some labels we created for Melaleuca, they're a winery in Canberra. sorry, in the ACT. Again, using colour to differentiate product SKUs, but also just a nice example of how you can use materiality, paper stock, foiling, and those kind of things to really, make a job really sing. And that's the end of my talk. That's our business card, and I have a few of those if you want. And any questions? Thank you. Yes.
Where can I get one of those grilled cheeses you were talking about?
Oh, well, Anthony, he's at the Pram Market, and he has a very flashy stall. It really stands out in there. But yeah, they're amazing. They really are.
Are you selling me grilled cheese?
Sorry, I'll stop talking. Yes.
Do you think that there are any graphic design principles that you see lacking often in video games?
That's a good question. I think nowadays, not so much. I think that, I think things like type selection and, marketing is thought about right at the start of any design process, and I'm sure it's the same for the game design industry most of the time. Maybe not so much for more indie developers, but it's definitely something that you sort of need to factor in right at the start of the process. But I think that, yeah, over time, I think there's a tendency in the game industry to kind of just do what, and I'm speaking out of turn here, I'm not 100% sure, but I think that there's a tendency to kind of just do what other people have done, and I think that, it's that kind of, I think like things like skeuomorphism and that kind of look have always been, prevalent in game design. But I think now, like studios like House and the way they're kind of like the design that and the art style that they're sort of injecting into their game just speaks to what the game is, and not so much what they think they should do. Yeah. So I think it's getting, I think it's quite good now. Yeah. Yes.
So when you're looking at designing a kind of brand for any organisation or something like that, I suppose what I'm curious about is like where you normally start. Do you start with looking at a logo? Do you start with a colour palette selection?
Yeah.
And if there's any approaches that might be able to translate into the way that a game can develop its kind of marketable identity?
It's a really good question. It kind of depends on the scope of the job, but just say we're doing a full brand ID for someone. The research phase is really crucial. Just knowing you need to sort of know the competitors in the industry inside and out, and know what people have done before, know what they haven't done, know what colours other people have used, what ones they haven't, how you can kind of set yourself apart. So the research phase is probably obviously the starting point, but strategy is also really crucial, and that kind of feeds everything that happens after that. And that is a thing, it's kind of a bit of a, there are people that are just brand strategists, and that's all they do, and they don't do any design, they just work out context for all the design that is going to happen. So you kind of, and that is informed by the research. So I guess, but in terms of actually the design, I think the first thing you look at is the logo. But it's informed by all that other stuff. Because the logo, like I said, it's a reductive kind of thing, and if you can say a lot with the logo, the rest of the brand elements kind of just fall out. That's it? Okay. That's my answer. Thank you. I think we're done. Yeah. No worries. Cool.